Disney gets hacked, Donald J. Trump media company soars, and what's going on with Nike? Hey, welcome back to Kyle's Financial News. I am your host, Kyle, and today's date is July 15th, 2024. More record highs were made today with the indexes. Pretty good in the morning session, and then after lunch came around, suddenly markets weren't so happy to be up there at the all-time highs anymore, and largely indexes rolled over. Disney gets hacked and loses over 1.1 terabytes of data over the last couple weeks. Data going as far back as 2019, largely from their Slack channels, over 10,000 different threads, messages, files, code, details of applications, you name it. There was a whole bunch of content in those messages in those Slack channels from all over the years. There was logins to different portals where they could monitor how many visitors and money they were making at different locations. There's a bunch of infographics up on Twitter, and this data has now been made entirely public to whoever wants to go and download it. We might see some more headlines coming out here soon from some independent investigators as they start to dig through this data and reveal some interesting info, if any. So we will have to see what comes of that. Donald J. Trump media company stock soars after the eventful weekend, the very intense eventful weekend. The stock this morning was up over 75% in pre-market trading, and then it started to slide a little bit throughout the day. Ended the session still about 30% up, and it's sliding even more into the aftermarket. So I suspect that was just a little bit of kind of buy the rumor, sell the news. The news being that there isn't any news. I'm not sure what the idea was there behind a unsuccessful assassination attempt on an ex-president and his public social media company. I suppose speculators were just more than happy to place some bets there. Trump's odds of winning the election on PredictIt have elevated to 68% now, and today he also announced his vice presidential campaign partner pick. Now, personally, I really don't like all this rhetoric that we've been hearing from people in power for some time now. We were dealing with this while Donald Trump was in office as a president, when the election was lost for his rerunning in 2020, and Biden won that one. There was a whole bunch of rhetoric around, we can't let this happen, this election is rigged, it must be stopped at all costs. Terminology like that. We had January 6th, and that's a whole different discussion. Now, these days, with the upcoming election, we have the complete opposite. We have Biden saying he must be stopped at all costs. This is a threat to our democracy. It's the end of America. It's just like, and then as soon as something bad happens, like such event as what we had this last weekend, they're suddenly all racing to get in front of the camera to say, oh, here in America, we can't allow violence. We can't allow this to happen to our democracy, when these are the very same people that are kind of indirectly calling for violence against their competitors. So it's just ridiculous how much language is being passed down onto the consumers and the viewers of, we can't let this happen. It's got to stop at all costs. And they're both pointing fingers at each other, and each one is going to be the end of democracy and the end of America. And then it's all 180. They completely turn away and go and argue the other side of it when something happens. I don't believe it. I don't buy in it. None of it is doing any good for political campaigns coming up here. So I don't want to dwell on that too much. I want to try to largely keep this channel politics free, but naturally there is a little bit of politics involved in markets. And so there has to be some attention paid to that from time to time. And not gonna just ignore it, because it's a part of the markets, it's a part of the larger economy. Now, I'm not one to suggest that the president necessarily runs the greater picture, runs the economy or whatnot, but it definitely does play a component in it. Otherwise, this week we have a bunch of federal member speakers having different meetings, which I don't expect any different kind of newsworthy type stuff coming out of there, other than some of them are very pro keeping interest rate higher for longer, and others are very pro it's long due for us to start lowering interest rates. So there will be some flip-flopping in headlines regarding that. We have housing data coming out later this week, retail sales data coming out this week, jobless claims, all still to come in the coming days. So we will just have to stay tuned on that. I'm sure there will be some up and down movement in the indexes and lots of volatility potentially in the next week or two. So what's going on with Nike? It's down 60% from all-time highs in late 2021. So I thought, well, let's go back to 2021 and see what was going on towards the end of that year. And that was about when they decided to cut 6 ties with major retailers, including Urban Outfitters and Macy's, amongst a few others. They were wanting to apparently go more kind of direct to consumer product line, be that online or social media, TikTok, Snapchat, however it is that they intended to do that through. I am starting to see a lot of discussion saying that Nike is in a very attractive price range and it shouldn't be going much lower, and it has a lot of potential to be going up. But just looking at some of the rough numbers, I'm not sure I quite agree with that. I would say that they're almost trying to kind of refine their fair value, and at $60, $70 a share, they're probably not that far off from where they should be. So I would argue that the potential for them to continue going down is unfortunately a little bit high. It's somewhat reasonable. They have had a number of downgrades from financial analysts in the recent past. So very curious to see where that one ends up here in the coming months. More stuff to keep an eye on, more news to be coming out later this week. Hopefully no more violence and intense situations coming related to the presidential campaigns. We just can't be having that. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing, and I will catch you after market close and the end of session tomorrow.